activity for my science project on narcolepsy is interviewing my mom, who has been diagnosed with type 1 narcolepsy. So my first question for you is, when were you first diagnosed with narcolepsy?
I was diagnosed with narcolepsy in March, it's either March or February of 2018. So that's about, 3 years ago.
Okay. And what caused you to get tests done to see if you had it?
So it's very challenging to get your diagnosis of narcolepsy. On average, it's 7 years between when you first have the symptoms to when you finally get diagnosed. And part of that is because physicians, doctors don't know a lot about narcolepsy. So I had been having symptoms for many years, but actually what pushed me to go to a different physician, which was a neurologist for a sleep study, was my doctor had thought I was depressed and sent me to see a psychologist. And I was meeting with a psychologist, and the psychologist said, I think there's something physically going on with you, because I was so tired all the time. I was sleeping a lot of hours, but I had difficulty getting up out of bed. I had some other symptoms. I had some weakness in my arms and my legs. They did a lot of tests for other diseases like multiple sclerosis to see if I had a stroke. And this particular doctor, she said to me, I know this sounds crazy, but I think you need to go for a sleep study. And I said, well, fine, I'll go for a sleep study, because I had been going to a lot of doctors to figure out what was wrong. And it was the sleep study, the neurologist who's also a sleep specialist, that gave me the diagnosis.
My third question is, how has narcolepsy affected your everyday life?
Well, in some ways, finally having a diagnosis to understand what's going on has been very helpful. But the issues I have with narcolepsy are my brain has difficulty concentrating sometimes, really focusing. Everybody with narcolepsy has something called excessive daytime sleepiness, and people assume if you have narcolepsy, you fall asleep all the time, you're always tired, but there's many of us that don't feel that way. What I feel like is I can't concentrate on things, I'm a little irritable, I can't remember things, I get headaches, and that's the challenging part, because for many years I've been able to concentrate on things and read things and write reports or write papers, grade papers. What helps sometimes is taking short naps, but the challenging thing is figuring out what I need to do in a day, and when I think my brain is going to be able to concentrate on things that you really need to be particular with, let's say like reading a research article, writing something, or grading student papers, I need to make sure that I do those things first, because if my brain decides, I'm not going to concentrate now, I don't get stuck and get behind in my work.
Okay, and then you kind of already answered this question, but my final one was, what is a common struggle you have to deal with because of narcolepsy?
I would say that the struggle for me is trying to plan my days, and sometimes, days are different. A lot of times if I'm really busy in a particular day and I've done a lot of work and spent a lot of time out the next day, I might be really fatigued. I think the other challenge is that what your question was? What's the challenge? Yeah. I think another challenge is having to adjust to not being able to do as much as I used to. I'm used to doing things all the time, and you have to say, well, I can't really do that, or I can't do everything I want to do. That requires a lot of concentration. I would say another challenge I have is my memory. My memory is not as good as it was before. It's gotten worse over the years, but I never had to write anything down. I could remember absolutely everything. So now I have to figure out, I'm not used to keeping my date book. I'm not used to writing everything down. And so I struggle with that, keeping things straight. Remembering where I put things, that's a big thing with people with narcolepsy, because sometimes if our brain's not quite working, It can kind of zap out into a little bit of a sleep, and we end up putting things. One time I found the keys in the refrigerator, the freezer. Why I put the keys there, I have no idea. So keeping things organized and remembering things, because if my brain's kind of on the fritz, my memory's just not as good. So that's definitely a challenge as well. I think the other challenge is dealing with what we call cataplexy for people that have type 1 narcolepsy. And that's when a sudden emotion occurs and your brain kind of slips into rapid eye movement into sleep. And during that time, part of our bodies become weak or paralyzed. And I actually didn't figure out that I had cataplexy until I got the narcolepsy diagnosis. And typically people experience cataplexy with more powerful happy emotions. For me, what triggers my cataplexy is like severe fear or anxiety, which I don't usually feel in life. But when I started having a lot of medical problems and becoming a little bit more anxious and fearful, that happens, and I generally lose strength in my hands and sometimes in my legs, and it can last, and it kind of fuels itself, because if you're getting anxious about something and then you can't use your hands so well, then you get anxious because you can't use your hands, and then you can't use your legs. And so I would say for me, that is something that I've never had to deal with before, because I generally don't feel those emotions of fear or anxiety. But, when you're dealing with narcolepsy, sometimes you have those emotions. So it's definitely trying to remain calm and not getting too worked up about things. So that's a huge challenge.
So this is the end of my interview. Thank you, Mom, for letting me interview you and letting me share your story with my class. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.